the woman always saying, if you don't follow my rules, I am your employer, then I will deport you or send you back to Philippines.
Yung pera kasi na ipinambayad namin nung pumunta ako dito, inipon namin mag-asawa yun nung nasa Abu Dhabi pa kami. Bali yung pinag-ipunan namin, parang nawalang parang bula. Ginamit lang nila yung papel, makuha yung pera mo, pero talaga namang walang kang trabaho pagdating dito. Yun ang buhay ng TFW, parang ano, ginawang negosyo lang yung pagpunta namin dito. Pag naubos na yung papel ng pag-stay mo, i-deport ka na.
The police asked me where is my passport. Then I said, my passport, my employer held it since we came here in Canada, so I never see my passport. In my mind, I said, is this Canada? This is not my dream.
Labor trafficking in British Columbia and in Canada is the recruiting, harboring, and controlling of a person or persons for the purpose of exploitation. In this particular case, the exploitation of the labor and services.
We see individuals that are vulnerable, who are controlled for the purpose of exploiting them, often if they have a skill. And those vulnerabilities that they're exploited for can be things like needing a place to stay, a place to work, or being able to provide for your family.
We're not only talking about physical control. We're not talking about people being bound in chains. We're talking about more subtle forms of control, such as threats of deportation, restricting a worker's movements, keeping their passport, and demanding that they perform work that is different than what is stated in their employment contract. These create an environment where workers feel compelled to continue working under very exploitative conditions. Canada has a history of bringing migrant workers to work in low-wage occupations under different immigration programs. Workers under these programs have limited or no access to becoming permanent residents in Canada. The Live-In Caregiver Program was a vehicle for Canadian families to bring in caregivers to look after children, the elderly, and people with disabilities. This program was the only program for temporary foreign workers that had a direct pathway to permanent residence for the workers. Recently, this program was eliminated and it was subsumed under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, which has less certain pathways to permanent residence.
Nagpunta ako ng Canada kasama ang employer ko at ang pamilya ng employer ko kasama ng 3 bata. Nag-promise sila sa akin ng magandang buhay sa Canada. Nung sinabi niya na we will bring you to Canada, then after 2 years, then we can help you to make your papers, and then you become a permanent resident of Canada, then you can bring your family there. So that's the only reason why I'm agreed to come with them. I work like almost 2 years, no friends, no day off, no holiday, so I work 7 days a week and I earn only 480 Canadian once a month. I keep going work because that's the only way how I can survive and support my kids. I didn't know that I came here in Canada as a tourist. So I worked almost 2 years and my visa is only 6 months, so I illegally work here in Canada. So I really shocked because I don't know that is my visa, because in my mind I am a caregiver and I'm legally work here in Canada.
Essex County is the largest under-glass greenhouse industry in the country, which is why we have so many seasonal agriculture workers and temporary farm workers that are here. Most of that is because we want cheap produce And many Canadian workers find that work very difficult to do, very hard to do. So traditionally, Canadians have not taken that work, the picking of the vegetables and fruits or packaging, which is what the temporary foreign workers are doing in the warehouse industry.
Under the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, workers come to Canada to work in the agricultural industry for periods of up to 8 months. The program operates through bilateral agreements with participating countries, which include Mexico and Caribbean countries.
The program started with the Jamaican farm workers, a couple hundred that came in to deal with labor shortages. And for the last 50 years, we've seen an increase every year to the point where we're in the 30,000 to 40,000 range.
Lo que ha pasado también es en ese tiempo cuando llegamos, como 3 años, había que tenían como un pozo de agua ahí, pero salía como amarillosa el agua. Y con esa nos bañábamos y con esa lavábamos la ropa. Así que lavabas una ropa color blanco, quedaba color café en la primera lavada. Cuando se bañaba uno te daba como comezón. Todo eso pasaba, pero nosotros le decíamos pues que necesitamos agua limpia o algo. Pues no, lo que nos decía, no, pues esa agua está limpia, en México la toman igual, así, dice. Pues al rentar aquí, pues yo pienso con lo que gana uno, pues con los 10 pues no alcanzaríamos a pagar. Las rentas son muy caras acá.
La verdad, yo en lo personal, todo el tiempo estoy haciendo trabajo peligroso. Porque, por ejemplo, a veces me toca que sprayar, pero no tengo el equipo adecuado pues, para aplicar.
Some vulnerabilities are inherent in a temporary foreign worker in that very often there are language barriers, of course. There may be geographic isolation for those workers if they're living on a certain farm, away from services. They don't often are explained what the laws are. So they don't know what their rights are. But even if they do, it's very, very difficult for them to know who are they to go to when they are in trouble. They don't have access to language classes or settlement services as other newcomers to our community are.
This leaves thousands, tens of thousands of workers from other countries basically in the hands of employers with limited, if any, federal monitoring enforcement provisions.
Tuve que derribar una casa de un greenhouse y sin ningún tipo de ayuda, solamente yo. Yo creo que el patrón hace esto para ahorrarse, en este caso si tiene que utilizar 3 personas, en vez de pagarle a 3 personas, entonces le paga solamente a una. La realidad es por eso que pues ahora yo veo muy diferente este asunto en Canadá, que como que nos quieren reprimir, nos quieren más que nada, nos ven como algo que es nada más lo uso y luego lo tiro, ¿no?
In the early 2000s, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program expanded to allow employers to bring in workers to work in a large number of different low-wage occupations for jobs in the hotel and restaurant industry, in construction, and in food processing.
Most often, the deception, the fraud that is inherent in trafficking starts in the country of origin. And it often starts with the recruiter who is employed by the business owner. And what we've seen most often is that unscrupulous recruiters will often have workers pay upwards $8, $10, even $12,000 Canadian for the privilege of working here in Essex County. And that debt really begins the process of enslaving a worker in a very difficult circumstance once they get here.
The first time I came to Canada, I work as a cashier. I work as a cashier in Alberta. But for 2 weeks, since my employer noticed that I was pregnant, so he doesn't like me to stay. So he talked to the agency from Vancouver and then sent me here to BC. The agency promised that they will get for me a new job, but kumakailan na wala pala talagang trabaho para sa akin dahil Yun nga, katulad ng mga naging kasama ko sa accommodation, same situation ko, wala din sa kanilang trabahong naghihintay. Pero dahil sa kailangan kong mabuhay, tinanggap ko yung trabaho na makapagtrabaho sa opisina kasama nila na mababa yung sahod, yung $5 per hour. Dahil syempre bago ako, hindi ko alam yung mga batas na pag pala ang permit mo sa isang employer lang, hindi ka maaring palipat-lipat na dalhin sa iba't ibang lugar. At kung ang permit ko ay para doon lang sa isang lokasyon, dapat doon lang pala ako magtatrabaho.
People from everywhere come to Toronto. We are a pull factor, because there is different communities, different languages. It's a very multicultural city.
Migrant workers are especially vulnerable because they're issued tied work permits that allow them to work for one specific employer, which creates a power imbalance that allows situations of labor exploitation and labor trafficking to occur. Their status in Canada is precarious because it is temporary and because workers rely on their employers for their immigration status.
At the very least, when people come, they have to have open work permits so that if they are being exploited and abused in one workplace, they have the same right I would have, which is to go to another employer and pursue whatever legal remedy they feel is appropriate, if any, for them. But while people are tied to one employer, they will never have the opportunity to be able to address or redress any of the damage that's been done to them.
We know that there are strong disincentives for these workers to want to bring forward a complaint because this is often perceived as putting their immigration and employment status in jeopardy, whether or not that is the case in practice.
The silence is the killer. Because sometimes we are forced to be silent because they don't want that we say anything, because that's the only thing that they want is to stay and work. You know what I mean? And they say, no, I will be at risk to say anything, so don't say it.
A rising trend that we're seeing in Canada is when a trafficker will sexually exploit their victim, and that person may be labor trafficked, but that becomes a component that's added in, especially if there's a live-in caregiver or employment scenario. It's much easier for an employer to do that, and often there's no witnesses, there's no cameras, and so there's no way to prove that it's happening and to be able to address it.
Yung kasing employer ko, bali binata siya. Lahat ng mga babae na kasama namin, hinahalikan niya, hinihipuan niya. Yung iba, minsan kinukulong niya pa sa isang kwarto bago makasahod. Yun nga, pagdating mo, aakbayan ka niya ng mahigpit, hawak sa bewang, akbay. Then minsan, siyempre buntis ka, hipuin ka sa tiyan mo, ganyan. Hanggang malapit na dito sa dapat hindi pinapakaalman ng hindi mo asawa. So, hindi maganda para sa akin yun.
On paper, migrant workers have many of the same employment rights as Canadians do. When a worker is exploited, they can go through the legal system to obtain compensation through employment standards and human rights tribunals. In 2015, human rights tribunals in both BC and Ontario issued record-high monetary damages for injury to dignity, feelings, and self-respect in 2 cases involving female migrant workers.
The largest challenges are in accessing the legal rights and entitlements that they ostensibly have. And there are significant challenges for these individuals in doing so because of the cost and time associated with accessing legal remedies, because of the knowledge and assistance that might be required to access these legal remedies.
Tumakas ako dun sa tinitirhan ko na accommodation na hindi siyempre alam ng employer ko kung saan ako pupunta. Ang sa buong akala nila na na-deport pala ako. Yun yung sa buong akala nila. Nakahanap ako ng mga organization na makakatulong sa akin. Nagkaroon ako ng sariling lawyer. Nakatira ako sa isang organization na nagkup-kup sa akin, so nakasurvive ako.
There's a need to increase the training of service providers, criminal justice partners, and other frontline workers in terms of what is it what is human trafficking, what is labor trafficking, and the fact that it occurs here in British Columbia.
One of the things that we struggle with is to have residential facilities that will accept individuals who do not have status in Canada who have been trafficked, because the level of support that they need is wraparound, be that financial, legal, medical, and other.
They all have issues with their status because 70% of them come in on the temporary foreign worker program. And so they're tied to a certain employer, and when they can't work for that employer anymore because that employer is trafficking them, they face status issues. And there's very few service providing organizations that are funded to deal with anyone who has no status at all.
If a worker has been exploited, or if their recruitment was fraudulent or deceptive, they can apply for a special temporary resident permit as a victim of human trafficking. This permit allows them to regain their status in Canada and access benefits and services, including healthcare, income assistance, and an open work permit, which they may need in order to recover from the ordeal they've been through and to start to move on with their lives. Because the TRP is policy-based and not a legislated protection, there's a high level of discretion on the part of immigration officers when deciding whether to issue the permit. This has been a challenge in several cases.
One of the areas that we see is still lacking in Canada is services for men, be that residential or otherwise. A lot of programming is geared towards female survivors, and I think that's an area that we need to be looking at in terms of the future in development.
If our ultimate goal is to eradicate or minimize the potential for exploitation, the potential for forced labor or labor trafficking, that our conversation should shift much more to asking what conditions we can create at the outset to prevent that from happening at all, rather than only focusing on what to do after it has happened.
One way to really strike at labor trafficking is to work at creating safer migration routes and creating a safer temporary foreign worker program.
It's important that we respond to this issue on a community level. Some of the most effective practices that we've seen is interdisciplinary work, where individuals from different backgrounds, be that mental health, addiction, residential programming, legal, immigration, government, come together in things like coalitions, and those coalitions work together to cover the gaps in services for trafficked persons, and also create a response together on a provincial and a national level.
Workers can also report to the police. In 2013 in BC, we had the first conviction of an employer for labor trafficking under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. This decision had a significant symbolic impact on caregivers and other temporary foreign workers. Not only did it send a strong message that labor trafficking is a crime that can be prosecuted, but other temporary foreign workers started to feel empowered to speak up about their similar experiences.
Yo creo que toda persona merecemos que nos respeten, que tenemos derecho a que más que nada nos expresemos.
I think most Canadians would be surprised to learn that a form of modern-day slavery is happening here in Canada. Labor trafficking is a hidden crime. It's a crime that we need to open our eyes to.
I don't think that people recognize that this is happening in communities that, you know, the people that our kids might be playing hockey with their kids may be exploiting workers. And it's very hard for us to begin wrapping our brain around what that means, how that is showing itself in our own communities.
The general perception of labor trafficking is that it doesn't happen. When we do provide education to the general public, we do find that they want it sensationalized. They want to talk about, you know, like the sex and the gore and the gangs, not so much about migrant worker rights, especially when there is this undercurrent of anti-immigration sentiment that goes along with it.
If we're seeing a situation in public of an individual, perhaps they're caring for a family or they're working in a store or on a farm, and we see that their conditions seem unfair or they're experiencing abuse, we need to speak up. If it's safe to do so, to try to talk to that person who's experiencing that, but if not, to report it.
Dahil pinag-reside nyo kami dito, ituring nyo kami ng tama, yung normal na tao na nabubuhay na parang citizen din, kahit hindi naman citizen, yung may benepisyo, may access kami ng tulong galing sa gobyerno in case na nangangailangan kami.
Pues yo pienso que le pediría que, pues, como en las armas tuvieran más inspección, como en seguridad de trabajo, que inspeccionaran las viviendas, ¿va? Porque, pues, como hemos platicado con los compañeros en otros lugares, hay compañeros que, pues, están también igual en malas condiciones las viviendas.
Before, I really regret that why I came here in Canada, because it's in 2 years I never see how it's beautiful. But then when I get my open working permit, then I meet more people. I meet like West Coast, I meet Deborah's, I meet Migrant. Then I learn how to like to live freedom.